Hey everyone, it's Caitlin. Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I make simple and delicious vegan recipes that anyone can enjoy. Today I am doing another compilation video because you guys seem to like those. I'm rounding up all of my favorite recipes using butternut squash, which, if I'm being honest, it's probably my top fall squash just in terms of versatility. Like, I feel like butternut squash can be used in a wide variety of things, like I literally just said, but you have soups, you can roast it, put it in salads, or even doing some pasta recipes using it. All the recipes that I'm sharing today can be found in the video description. All the details will be on my blog, and I'll also link a few other recipe videos of other fall related content that you might want to check out as well. So without further ado, let's get into the recipes.
First up, we're going to be making some butternut squash and white bean chili. This chili has sort of a Tex-Mex twist to it, which I really love. And we're actually going to start out by dry toasting our nutritional yeast in a large pot. This adds a lot of umami flavor to the chili, and I highly recommend it. So then next, we're going to add in some onion and some finely diced cilantro stems with a splash of water. Then you're going to mix this all around until the onion becomes fragrant and translucent. Then we'll go in and add in our red bell pepper, jalapeno, and some warming spices. Then just add that in. We're going to saute it for a bit to toast the spices. Then we'll add in our white beans, our cubed butternut squash, and some vegetable broth. I'm using navy beans here. I find that they are the most tender, so they break down the most in the chili. But you could also use cannellini beans or the white kidney beans. I think they're like Great Northern beans. Those will work too. I just personally prefer the texture of the navy beans. As you can see, we're going to simmer the chili until our butternut squash is nice and tender, and you can see how thick and creamy it gets too. I just topped it off here with some freshly sliced jalapenos and a little bit more of the cilantro to add a nice flavor to it. But that's it. This recipe is great for meal prep. It freezes super well too, and it's packed with cozy flavor, but it has a nice kick from the spices as well. This chili is good on its own, but I also like to serve it with cornbread if I have some on hand. I think the combination is really great. Next up, we're going Italian inspired, and we're making some butternut squash stuffed shells. So this is definitely more of a main dish, maybe a Thanksgiving main recipe. There's a few more steps, but I promise all the effort is worth it. So first off, we're going to roast some veggies. I have a whole head of garlic. I'm just drizzling that with a bit of olive oil and wrapping it in foil, and then setting that off to the side on a baking sheet. Then we're also going to be adding some butternut squash and some shallots to our baking sheet as well. Season those with some salt and pepper and give them a good drizzle of olive oil. Then we're going to roast these up in the oven until they're all nice and caramelized. We'll actually be using these roasted veggies in 2 different ways in the recipe, and they add a lot of depth of flavor to the dish overall. So in the meantime, while those are roasting, you can go ahead and cook your shells according to the package instructions. You want them to be al dente or slightly below al dente. And my hack here is after your shells are done cooking, transfer them to a baking sheet so they don't stick together, because if you leave them in the pot, it's going to be a hot mess. So now that our veggies are roasted, we're going to use some of them for our sauce. As you can see, they came out nice and beautiful. We're going to be adding all of the shallots and about 2/3 of a cup of butternut squash, and then that whole head of roasted garlic as well. Then we're also going to add in some olive oil, which helps make the sauce a little smoother, plus some vegetable broth and some creamy oat milk or cashew milk. We're also going to add some soaked cashews, and then we're going to blend this all up until we get a nice, thick, delicious sauce. Then the final step is to make our ricotta filling. So I made my vegan ricotta recipes. I've shown this in previous videos and it's on my blog, so I didn't include it in this video for the sake of time, but it's in the bowl. We're adding the rest of our roasted butternut squash, some frozen spinach that I've defrosted and squeezed all of the extra liquid out, and some rosemary and black pepper. You're going to mix all of this up until you get a nice and creamy ricotta filling. And I love how there's still butternut squash in every bite, and the spinach and rosemary just add even more flavor to it. So now to assemble our shells, we're going to pour between 1 and 2 cups of sauce on the bottom of a 9x13 or similar sized pan. And then you're going to put about a tablespoon of filling in each shell. It depends on your shell size though, and I like to use a cookie scoop. I find that it makes it a little bit neater. So just put all of your shells into the baking dish, top it off with the remainder of the sauce, and I like to put some vegan cheese on top too to add that extra layer of creaminess. Then you're going to bake it in the oven and serve it once it's done baking. The cheese gets all melty, it's packed with cozy fall flavor. This is really a very delicious recipe, so you should try it out. Next up, we're making another casserole, but this is a butternut squash and brown rice casserole, and I would say this is a little bit better for the weeknight or when you want a more fuss-free, hands-off sort of thing. So it's a dump and bake casserole, which you guys know that I love, and I'm pretty sure you love too. So we're adding some rosemary and thyme to a pot with vegetable broth, plus some smoked paprika, garlic powder, and a black pepper. Mix all of this up, and then you can cover it and put it on the stove and bring it to a boil. Then in the meantime, for our dump and bake casserole, we're just dumping everything in. So we've got our cubed butternut squash, some thinly sliced shallots, and some beans. This time I did use cannellini beans, so they're a little bit heartier and they're not going to break down like in the chili. I use the navy beans, which break down a little bit more. But again, you can use whatever bean you prefer. Then I'm topping everything off with some brown rice. I like the heartiness that the brown rice adds to this recipe. But if you wanted to, you could see the recipe on the blog for instructions for white rice. But then you're just going to top it all off with the liquid. Make sure to press everything down so the rice is fully submerged. Then you can cover this, and we're going to bake it in the oven until everything is nice and tender and the veggies are fully cooked. So then a final step for this recipe, I like to add in some fresh kale, only at the end though, so it doesn't get overcooked. So I finely chop the kale, and then as soon as this comes out of the oven, I stir it in, and then you can just let the casserole sit for about 5 minutes or so, and the kale becomes nice and wilted and cooked without being overcooked and like brown, if you know what I mean. So I'm topping this off with my rosemary garlic cashew cream, which is also on the blog. I'll also link it down below. It's great on basically everything, but I think it really helps tie everything in this casserole together. And that's it. You can dig in and enjoy. I love how this is a perfectly balanced meal, and you don't have a lot of dishes to do because it's mostly made in a casserole dish. Next up, we're going to be making a butternut squash and apple soup. I really love the addition of green apple in this recipe. I think it's perfect around the holidays, and it adds a nice like fresh tart flavor. It's hard to describe, but if you've never had apple in a soup, I highly suggest you give this a try. So first we're going to saute our onion and our green apple in some olive oil in a large pot until the onion is nice and translucent. And I do recommend using a Granny Smith apple for this recipe to get that tart flavor. Then we're going to add in our spices and some garlic. We've got some rosemary and fresh sage here. Give that a mix and saute until the garlic is fragrant. Then we'll add in our cubed butternut squash and some vegetable broth. And then to make things nice and creamy, we're also adding in some coconut milk. So then the rest of this recipe is very straightforward. You're just going to bring this to a boil over high heat, then reduce the heat and let it simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes until the butternut squash is nice and fork tender. And the best part about this recipe too is you don't really have to worry about chopping off your stuff to like a tiny bite-sized portion because we're going to be blending it all up. So you can just transfer everything to a blender, then return it to the pot and season with additional salt and pepper to taste if you want. But the soup is so velvety and creamy, and it's like the perfect thickness. I really enjoy it. It's delicious on its own, and in this video I decided to just make it a little bit fancy with a swirl of extra coconut milk and some fresh sage leaves. But this is also really good with croutons or with some like crusty bread on the side for dipping. The sauce is just, well, not sauce, soup, but it could be reused as a sauce if I'm being honest. I have totally mixed this with some pasta for a heartier meal too. Last but not least, I just wanted to remind you all that I just shared another butternut squash recipe on an older video on my YouTube channel for this roasted butternut squash salad. It is so good and delicious, so if you want to check it out, I'll have it linked in the video description.
Alright friends, and that's it for this video. Leave a comment down below and tell me which one of these recipes you want to make first. And also I'd be curious to know if anyone never peels their butternut squash. I have always peeled it. I think that the skin is thin and you could technically eat it, but I always just find that I prefer to not eat it. But fun fact, when I studied abroad in Buenos Aires for 5-ish months in college, my host mother would always make me butternut squash for dinner, and she would never peel it. So I wonder if it's like a regional thing. If you live in Argentina and you never peel your squash, let me know. Maybe it's just her thing. I don't know. Either way, I found it interesting. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If you have any other fall or winter or holiday related content that you would like to see from me, leave a comment down below as well. I'm happy to take video requests, and make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can see whenever I post content. And if you want to follow me on other social media platforms, I have an Instagram and a TikTok as well, full of yummy and delicious vegan recipes. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to virtually seeing you soon in the next video. Bye!